Start going, yeah? Hey, Todd.
Hey, Silver.
You ready to start?
I am ready to roll.
Okay. Does our clock start going down in a second? Okay, I'm on. Hi, everyone. My name's Silver Oliver. I'm information architect at Data Language. And this is loosely based on a blog post that Paul Wilton wrote, and it was sort of reflecting on an old BBC project, which is now over 10 years ago, and so thinking about what is the state of things since then? What has changed? Where are we now? Todd, do you mind going to the next slide?
Not at all.
Thank you. So at the time, incredibly exciting. We wouldn't have been called it a content graph at the time, but it was kind of a reference implementation looking back, and we were taking program schedules, live feeds, video on demand, data, and putting it together with athlete teams, sport pages, and creating this amazing experience over multiple platforms. It was all very exciting at the time, and quite a few people here were involved in it at different stages. Next slide, Todd. And it worked on quite a familiar pattern, that hasn't changed an awful lot, which is essentially we built out a knowledge graph for sport. We associated it with a model for the media and identifiers, pulled that together, and then broadcast that on multiple different platforms. And it's a pattern that still stands today. So kind of the question is then that if we had the pattern then, how much is this being used today in sort of news, media, and other areas? Todd, next not slide, please. Yeah, and I think we've spent most of our time since then working in all the the sectors that you've seen discussed. So finance, healthcare, and actually done very few projects in media. It seems like after this, there's been sort of that we haven't had that sort of we haven't had that push in that sector as we that we might expected. Todd, do you mind going back to the presentation?
Yeah,
Thank you.
It seemed. Is that the right slide, Silver? It seems to be.
No, we're onto your email. Oh no, sorry, God, it's just this one. How weird. Okay, two different screens. I'm so sorry. Wow. Okay. Thank you, Todd. Okay, yeah, next slide.
Where you'd like to be?
Yeah, so what we might have expected is, this is a totally different slide. What we might have expected is sort of commoditization over time. Over 10 years, we'd expect to see these sort of component parts become more accessible, more affordable, and easier to use. Next slide, Todd. And that hasn't really been the case, and that's been one of the issues that sort of essentially, building a knowledge graph is like putting together a blockbuster. The result is amazing when you do it, but the barrier to entry is incredibly high, and so is the total cost of ownership. The content graph pattern's still tightly coupled to RDF and other technologies and ontologies, which are not necessarily the most accessible. The tooling is improved in some areas, not all, and even where you've got vast improvement on terms of triple stores and other parts of the stack, you still have to integrate those, and it's sort of an expensive process. So the cost of doing this has still been very, very high, even 10 years later. Todd, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And I think, and this I feel like is one of the sort of underlying themes of this conference, which is software as a service and the way it's impacted other areas, and I'm starting to see it impact knowledge graphs effectively. So this idea that people who've done implementations which have been successful can take those component parts, put them together with great user experience at a cost, and basically a sort of button press to get it up and running. And with content graphs, putting the right set of things together and giving people access to that, I think is going to be the sort of turning point where we start to see the impact in media and broadcast again. So I'm going to hand over to Todd in a minute, and he's going to start sort of tying those threads together and look at how it's starting to impact various different projects. Todd, over to you.
Silver, thank you. So hello, everyone. My name is Todd Carter. I'm going to take you through what we're calling Season 2, which starts out with the story of Resolute Square, which is a a project that was conceptualized by the Lincoln Project. But before I do, I wanted to just take a second to connect to the themes that Silver was talking about, the cost and expense of setting up, deploying, and managing knowledge graphs at scale. I started working with the team from datalanguage in 2000 and I suppose 14 on a project for Disney Research, where we were standing up a knowledge graph for something called Creative Genome. And that knowledge graph probably took almost a year to stand up. And, maybe the expense of it was something, high six figures, just under $1 million. And, if we bring that forward now to 2022, and we look at what it took to build a completely knowledge graph powered next generation publishing platform for Lincoln Project. This happened in the course of 2 months. So what was a year and $1 million is now perhaps 2 months and some tens of thousands of dollars. So for all of you guys in the audience, folks in the audience, Lincoln Project had this vision after the last election cycle of really how they were asking this question: how do we expand and amplify, our brand and the reach that we have created? How could we create kind of a pro-democracy media company that would allow us to, amplify our mission, our pro-democracy, our pro-democracy mission? And so they set out to build this entity called Resolute Square. They recruited me to help lead the technical build, and I recruited datalanguage to help me execute on that vision. The pattern unpacks along 3 simple dimensions. You sort of start with data, both first, and third-party data. You start with a domain model that gives you sort of a single view. We wanted to have as a modern publisher, a kind of single 360-degree view of all the people, media places, sort of everything that makes up the domain of politics, and they could support a hyper-connected user experience, and then sort of super advanced, state-of-the-art analytics, so that we could really manage community growth and engagement. So data is the foundation of these activities, and then we built a platform that combined state-of-the-art interactive live streaming technology, with sort of commodity, email marketing technology, technology for authentication, authorization, payments, dunning, all these types of things, but all driven directly out of this content as a service or content graph that sits inside datalanguage's data graph platform. So there's an API, all the data gets loaded, the domain model is deployed, and then we built a React.js app on top of that, and then that React.js app sort of virtually integrates all these services into a seamless customer experience. So that's really the platform. And then the app, we focused on this idea of hyperconnectedness, right? Of making all of the topics, the contributors, the aggregations of contributors on topics, and all of those types of concepts of interconnecting those, making those discoverable out through SERP. So all of these pages include structured data that index across a suite of foundational SERP features with a particular emphasis on video. So the video content of the Lincoln Project or Resolute Square is indexed in the time dimension using something called key video moments. And then all of that content is externalized onto the SERP and social ecosystems through structured data, but with monetization occurring directly on the Resolute Square app as opposed to on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. So that pattern set the stage for what we think of as an extraordinarily exciting innovation for publishers, but very specifically for publishers in the world of television. So our focus, I'm the CEO of a company called Thinking Media. It's a Los Angeles-based company. We're focused really primarily on the notion of hyperconnected TV, OTT, over-the-top television, and specifically fast, free advertising supported television. And we think there's an opportunity now that it doesn't sit behind a firewall to innovate, to bring, let's say, the best of the web to TV and vice versa, and create more hyper-connected experiences. And so this is just a little technology demonstrator that's we're working on that brings together, live sports with automated, AI-generated race highlights, replays, multiple cameras, niche sourcing or crowdsourcing through gamification in the form of things like live quizzes, deep, data-driven race analytics, automated generation of clips, of course, chat, and in the upper right-hand corner, full tokenomic incentives for both creators and the audience. So that's where we think this is likely to go. We think that pattern is going to be powered by content as a service and by knowledge graphs, and we're excited to be part of it. And with that, I think I'll pause and let's see if there's any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question about the last thing you said about content as a service. I wonder if you could elaborate on that, Todd.
Yeah, I mean, very, very quickly, I think, we view content, our approach, I suppose, to content is, starts with the notion of atomization, where we take the content, we break it down, we interconnect it to concepts in the graph. These are patterns that Silver and the team of Data Language and others pioneered at the BBC. When they did that at the BBC, they were focused on what I think, the excitement of the time was around this concept called linked data, if you remember that. And the idea was to sort of atomize all your content and then sort of assemble it dynamically, in page, through the graph. We've taken that pattern just one step further into what I call linked media. And this is, was an area of some excitement on the heels of linked data, back in the early teens. I think what's happened now that's different is the tooling is there to do this, and it's no longer research, activities. We can platform like we did for Resolute Square. I mean, that's a linked media application, but it's platformed on top of, a bunch of existing mature web services with mature interfaces. That brings down the, your cost. What it really unlocks is the ability to innovate. So we can stand up pages and aggregations and different user experiences. I guess perhaps you could think of it like in the context of like a multi-platform mandate, right? We can drive experiences all across the web from that common backend, using that content in atomic form, and then building various types of in-stream aggregate, on-page aggregations. Those are the ones we're most familiar with, but you could also think of those same types of aggregations delivered in a streaming context as well. And that's fundamentally what we mean is content as a service. This ability to utilize your content like Lego blocks to build infinite number of new things.
Speaking my language, thank you. Other questions, folks?
So I'm wondering about the graph itself and what these relationships are like. So if I'm trying to imagine the racing car example there, and you mentioned sort of like getting different camera angles on the cars and things like that. And so I can see a lot of associations, but I'm wondering, are these like things that you think people might be interested in, is sort of a richer experience, or are there sort of rules where you're actually deciding what makes sense to show to people based on their context? So I'm just wondering how tight or loose this sort of relationships that you're building are.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I think it's one that Silver might also have a strong opinion on. I think it's really both, right? I mean, I think you can instantiate all kinds of rules if you want, but I mean, fundamentally, we're trying to approach this from the perspective of user journeys. I mean, at least at Thinking Media, right? So what do people want? You know, we observe. I think it's common knowledge. You know, sort of like 77% of all people that watch television watch it with a mobile in their hand and look up content related to the things they're watching on screen. So how do you unlock, you know, a user journey for those people on a device that helps them, you know, maybe answer some of those kinds of questions? In the racing example, you know, we're super interested in context around venues, events, drivers, makes, models, these types of things, right? And how do we allow users to explore that interconnectedness and relatedness, you know, in a meaningful level in aggregate and, you know, in a personal level, right? And so, you know, I think it, you know, the degree to which it's sort of driven by rules or driven by this sort of user journey pattern is a question, you know, for our publishing partners, not just for us in isolation. But I think the answer can be either, and you can think of it like either as rheostatically either, right? So that you can blend more towards a rule-driven experience or more towards, you know, just sort of a land, we call them land anywhere, go anywhere user journeys. But the ability for someone to come in deep, Wikipedia style, from something like a SERP, and then land on a page and then just construct that page and the context of that page on the fly for that user. That's the type of thing we're interested in.
I'll take a punt to that one as well, but certainly from media projects worked on that very much see it as integrated with product decision making, and actually start to think about a relationship in a knowledge graph like a product feature, that we have to say, what's the value, what's the cost of this, can we sustain maintaining this for the, you know, foreseeable future. And I think that bringing product and the management of the knowledge graph in those decisions, I think, is a really interesting and fruitful area. So that would be my answer to that. It's essentially a product decision, but one made with sort of what's the cost of this and what's the benefit of it. Can I just add one more thing, which I think is really interesting, is that particularly with sport and sort of other areas of media, quite often this data already exists. They're paying for it. They're not using it in the right way. So lots of sports knowledge graphs are about saying, you're already buying this sports data. What if actually we, rather than just plonking it on pages, we actually say, look, this is the backbone of your site. You've already got this data. Let's start using it in a different way. Use these identifiers as part of your controlled vocabulary. So you're sort of hooking content and data onto a sort of common backbone. And I think that's a really interesting sort of change of perception about sort of using your data in sensible ways, which I guess is slightly different to your question, but cool.
I'll take this bully poll. Did anybody else have a question? Because I'll talk to these guys all day.
Got 1 minute.
Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh. you hear us, Todd?
No, I lost the audio feed, Silver.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
I think.
He didn't share it with audio, so he's not going to.
Yeah, we can see your screen, Todd.
Oh, I'm told that he didn't share it with audio, so they won't be able to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no audio on the screen. I was just going to maybe share a couple screenshots, Silver, to give people context for this thing in action. Is that helpful, or do you want to just keep
I think a walkthrough demo.
Okay, sure. We've got 4 minutes
with
left.
Just a voiceover. Yeah, in a couple minutes, that would be great.
Yeah. So I mentioned this during the talk. I mentioned this idea of structured data and content unpacking across a range of foundational SERP features. So this is a particular. We call this a key video moment. I just did a site restricted query to find it, but you can see it presents as an organic result. It presents. If we go over to image SERP types, we have this same everything is connected clip, videos, news, and then that clip just links, to, in this case, a video moment, just about 30 seconds of content related to an individual, Ben Masalas, talking about the degree to which it's important to interconnect all the different pro-democracy movements around the country. But what's interesting is that is actually a moment of a much larger video. That much larger video is about defending, the defeating the right wing. Let me just pause here. Defeating the right wing media machine. That's made up of many other key video moments with different topics. There's a whole sort of set of topics around that, a whole set of speakers around that, a whole bunch of contributors to that. And so from a SERP, you're able to land, on a page. We build the page. That's really just a sort of, what do I want to call it? A rendering, a materialization of data that's stored directly in the graph. And that's what drives the user experience to the whole platform. And you can just kind of move through speakers, content, topics on the fly. And so that's sort of the general theme that we have of content, dematerialization, and then using that to then build these user journeys on the fly.
Thank you.
We're almost at time, but I think we do have time for one or two more questions if anyone has anything additional. I did want to ask, this might not be a quick question, Todd, but I'm curious about if you have a methodology or an approach of the stitching together, because you've mentioned both customer journey mapping, the front end of this whole experience, and then these publishing partners on the back end with all this great content. Is there a methodological, because this is new stuff, and I'm just curious how you put it all together.
So, yeah, I mean, it gets, and Silver can speak to this. I mean, we put it all together literally in the data language platform. So, it starts with this idea of a domain model. And this is literally the domain model for the Resolute Square project. Let me just zoom in on it, right? So if this is to your question, we model things like creative works, which could be videos, but could also be key video moments, playlists, podcasts, newsletters, landing pages, articles, concepts, programs. But we also model more mundane things like users, and their subscription status, age range, subscription group, country, region, right? All those types of relationships. So really the whole business domain is modeled in the package. And then you're able to just quickly, let's go back to that everything is connected example. I'm just gonna everything. So you can see there it is. It's a video moment. We click on it. There's the, sort of properties of the moment. We can edit that moment if we want, but just because we've got about a minute left, we can also visualize it, right? So you saw it in the user interface just a few moments ago. There's Ben. That's the key video moment. Everything is connected. It's part of this piece called Defeating the Right Wing's Authoritarian Media Machine. That piece itself is connected to all these other pieces, other speakers, other topics, authoritarianism, etc. And so, what we've tried to do is sort of map the domain and then annotate content with concepts, if you will, from that domain model. and then that drives the whole user experience.
Fantastic. You did it in record time. Thanks, Todd. And thanks, Silver.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
So I'll have a quick turnaround, and then Andrea will be up in just a minute.